Alright, so the first thing we're going to talk about in the science is going to be classical conditioning. Now, classical conditioning was started by Ivan Pavlov, where he's the one that made it more well known. But classical conditioning, by its simple definition, is taking something that means nothing to the dog, which will be neutral, and then you pair it with something that means something to the dog. We'll just say stimulating. So you have to use something to bridge this gap. What Ivan Pavlov used, he had a bell that he would ring, and he paired that with food. After a while, he started learning that when you ring the bell, the dog would drool and get excited for the food. So through enough repetition and consistency, the pairing between something that was neutral to the dog and something that was stimulating to the dog, these became equal. Now, this is what a lot of people forget and overlook in classical conditioning. Through consistency, when a dog is classically conditioned to something, the neutral stimuli, or the neutral thing, is equal to what was stimulating the dog to begin with. What they've learned is when you put these electrodes on the dog and you ring the bell, it has the same chemical reaction in the brain as if it just received the food, because it's been paired with food for so much that it starts to have the same reaction. So this is what a lot of clicker trainers use, and this is where a lot of them fail when they first start off. They say, well, if I don't do one-for-ones, which means click and reward, every time the dog does something you click and reward, that, if you do that for too long, if you click and you don't reward, the dog checks out. It says, you know what, I'm not listening no more, it's not fair, I'm not getting my reward. So it's very important that early on in the stage, when the dog has been classically conditioned to the clicker or to the verbal marker in what we use, we stop doing one-for-ones. We start doing intermittent or random reward-based. Because this, what it does is, any learned behavior can become unlearned. Okay? So the learned behavior here is the ringing of the bell means food. If you stop ringing the bell and giving food totally and completely, over time, that chemical reaction in the brain will start to dwindle until you unteach the dog, to where you counter-condition it to understanding that ringing the bell no longer means receiving the reward. So at some point in the very beginning stages, when the dog is classically conditioned properly, you stop doing one-for-ones and you start doing random rewards, which you'll see in future videos. Another important thing with classical conditioning is we use verbal markers. Verbal markers remove the click. Okay, verbal markers is the same principle, but we use verbal words that mean something. We condition this to the dog. These verbal markers are, the first one we do is ready. Every time I get the dog out of the crate and we're about to do training, I'll say ready. This is very important for any type of working dogs, because you classically condition the dog to understand that ready means it's time to work. It's time to give me 100% focus. So every time you say ready, the dog clocks in, is how I say it. I say the dog clocks in and he's ready to go to work. The next thing that we start conditioning is yes. Okay? Yes is a reward marker. The dog will get a reward 100% of the time that I say yes in the beginning stages. And then we'll go more into intermittent rewarding. But right now we want to condition the dog to understand that yes means they are getting a reward. This is also a release marker. So it means whenever the dog hears yes, it knows it did what was correct. It's going to be no longer expected to keep doing it. So let's say I say sit. The dog sits. I say yes. That means the dog can come off the sit and get its reward. The next thing we use in our training is nuh-uh. Nuh-uh. Nuh-uh means try again. Nuh-uh means you did it incorrectly, but you're not getting a correction and you're not getting a reward. It simply means try again. Next, we have good. Good is our duration marker. Good means you did it correctly, keep doing it correctly to get the yes. So I say sit, the dog sits. I say good. The dog knows good means he has to continue doing it. And then I will say yes, which means the dog doesn't have to continue doing what it's doing and gets the reward. Then we have no. No is a correction or a punishment of some sort. And this will change depending on what we're doing with the dog. So now I say I'm working with the dog and it goes to run away. I say no. It gets a correction and then it comes back to me. So no means stop what you're doing. You are not doing what I told you to and you're getting a correction or some form of punishment. The last thing is free. I know a lot of trainers use free as a release marker, but I use it to mean that we're no longer training or that the dog can now clock out and become a dog again. So if it's a working dog, say you're a police officer, you pull up to a car, you go to the dog, you say, ready. The dog now knows it's going to go search for drugs. You get out, you send it for the drugs. It starts searching the car, it indicates, and you say, yes. The dog breaks the indication, comes back to you, you reward the dog, and then you say, free, and then you walk the dog back to the car. So this is also very important for sports people. I will use the free command at the very end of, say, a judge's review. A lot of people will stop training at the end of the routine. Then they come off the field, they tell the dog to down, and the dog is crawling and shrimping everywhere, and the judge is trying to give you your review, and the dog is all around your feet. Well, I only use free at the very end when the dog is not expected to receive any more verbal commands. So this I would hold until I would make the judge's portion of it a part of the obedience routine, and then I would tell the dog to come back up. We'd walk off the field, and then I'd say free, play with the dog and everything, get it de-stressed, and then put it away. So these are our verbal markers, and it all ties into classical conditioning. Once again, classical conditioning is taking something that means nothing to the dog. In this case, it's these verbal words, because let's face it, they don't speak the English. And through repetition and conditioning the dog, it starts to learn what each word means. Once you have developed a totally conditioned dog to these verbal markers, you have successfully created a training language. So now training is going to be so much easier because the dog understands exactly what's expected, when's it expected, and what's causing things of that nature. So classical conditioning, ready, yes, nuh-uh, good, no, and free. So write these down, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about how this will incorporate into our operant conditioning of our dog to create and modify behavior.